I think as a lawyer representing people who have suffered discrimination in the workplace and representing them and beginning to understand as we develop their cases the subtleties of how discrimination occurs and the unconscious and implicit bias, the assumptions, made me understand, I think, and be able to speak to where this comes out where it's not addressed by particular legislation or where the legislation is inadequate. So it became apparent to me from not only my own work and representing these people, but also amongst the national chatter, was that women attorneys, women litigants, women expert witnesses, women judges even, women jurors, were not necessarily accorded the same belief in their authority and their power and their competence and their education. And so I know that Justice Gunderson and Justice Mowbray had attended a number of American Bar Association conferences. And so that it came about that the Nevada Supreme Court created the Gender Bias Task Force. They also created a Race Bias Task Force to see if the justice system, not just lawyers, but was the justice system in implicit ways treating people differently because of their race or their color or our stereotypical perceptions about what does a lawyer look like. Because in 1985, I did not look like your typical lawyer, on TV. I didn't look like a person of power, this short, chubby girl, in a suit. She doesn't look like a person of power, so we don't look like a judge, or we don't look like a person who is to be understood and to be listened to. So we undertook that. I was part of the panel along with Catherine Landreth, who was our first female U.S. attorney in Nevada, and along with Justice Gunderson and a number of other, Franny Forsman, Miriam Shearing certainly, all of the women whose names are synonymous with legal progress for women and women lawyers in Nevada. We held public hearings so people could come, especially women could come and testify and say how they had been treated. And we were appalled to learn that many women were dismissed, they weren't believed. Most of the women lawyers who are my age can tell you that when they first arrived at depositions, they were always asked, are you the court reporter? And you'd say, no, I'm the lawyer, I'm not the court reporter. Or are you the secretary, or are you this? There were all those stereotypical ideas. So I think a bit of that changed, number one, by this critical mass of women attorneys who are here, but also by virtue of us saying, you have to treat us equally, and challenging people. I know a couple of judges who said to me, Kathy, you're not going to like what I'm going to say. And I said, I'm going to report you. And I did it in a joking way, but it made people understand, I think, that understanding that judges were treating women differently. At one point, we were discussing domestic violence, and the Supreme Court ordered every judge in Nevada to attend a training on domestic violence because we understood from what women litigants were reporting to us, what domestic violence victims were reporting, how Metro treated them, that they were not being taken seriously, that their bruises and their injuries and the crimes that were committed upon their person were just as much a crime, an alleged crime, as if they didn't know the perpetrator. And just because it happened in your own house and it was your husband who was beating you up and breaking your arm and giving you black eyes, that doesn't give him immunity. And it would, of course, go the other, all genders included. So that's what the study at that time was starting to open people's eyes to study it and to have real victims talk about what had happened to them and how they were treated. And that led to some changes. It led to this domestic violence training. It led to more robust prosecutions of sexual assault and rape victims. So we were working on that in the legal side, and then additionally we were working in the legislature. So women lawyers were working, shoulder to shoulder with those legislators who are, iconic figures in Nevada, the Jean Sagerblooms, the Jean Ford.